was so angry with God. Reality star Todd Chrisley reveals faith struggles when in prison. Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another video. I hope everyone's having a great day. Before watching the video, please subscribe and like it. Despite his off-color, Southern sense of humor, real estate mogul Todd Chrisley has never shied away from talking about his faith in God. But it was the latest chapter in his life, his more than 2 years in prison, that put his reliance on the Lord to the test. Chrisley and his wife, Julie, stars of the popular reality TV series Chrisley Knows Best, have maintained their innocence since their 2022 trial in Atlanta, where they were ultimately convicted on charges of bank fraud and tax evasion. Chrisley, for his part, has said they will detail the proof of wrongful conviction in an upcoming show. The pair was just pardoned this spring by President Donald Trump. During a lengthy conversation on his daughter Savannah's podcast, Chrisley opened up about his struggles with doubt and failure to understand how he and his wife ended up in prison cells. "It was hard that first night, and I was so angry with God," Chrisley said of his first night behind bars. "I remember when the lights went out. I laid there and I cried. And I said, 'God, why have you forsaken me? What did I do in my life that warrants this? You know these things aren't true, yet you allowed it to happen.'" The 56-year-old said he had a dream when he finally fell asleep. In it, he recalled God telling him, "I have planted you where I need you, and when you leave, they will rise." At the time, Chrisley said the dream made no sense to him, but his perspective has since changed. "Now I understand it," he told his daughter, "because when I leave, they will rise. Well, I have left and now the place is closing." The Federal Bureau of Prisons announced in December it would be closing the Federal Correctional Institute in Pensacola due to significant disrepair and to maximize resources and mitigate safety concerns. The decision to shutter the facility came last year, though Chrisley has since praised the move. During a press conference at the end of May, he said some of the inmates at FCP were discriminated against. For its part, the BOP has said it is aware of Chrisley's statements and reviewing his concerns. When he first went to prison, Chrisley said he had to learn total surrender to God, especially when it came to his children, 2 of whom were minors at the time of his incarceration. Savannah, at that point, became the legal guardian for the Chrisley's son Grayson and their granddaughter Chloe, whom the reality TV stars legally adopted. "I knew in my heart that you would take care of Grayson, that he would take care of Chloe," he said, "and I prayed for your strength every day. I asked God to renew you every day. I said the same prayer every night, for God to place a protective hedge around my family, for Him to keep a healing hand on you at all times." Todd Chrisley's life was once a picture of perfection, or so it seemed. The perfectly coiffed hair, the sharp suits, the immaculately decorated homes, the booming voice of a man who seemed in control of every aspect of his world. For years, the patriarch of Chrisley Knows Best painted a version of Southern success that mixed wealth with humor, faith with flair, and discipline with affection. Fans were captivated by the Chrisley family's lavish lifestyle and unfiltered dynamics. But when that facade was shattered by a dramatic fall from grace involving convictions for tax evasion and bank fraud, Todd's world spiraled into a reality darker than anything a reality show could script. Now, months into serving a federal sentence at a facility in Florida, Todd Chrisley is pulling back the curtain again. But this time, the story he's sharing isn't wrapped in wealth or witty one-liners. It's raw, soul-bearing, and deeply human. In a recent message passed through his daughter Savannah and revealed in a moving podcast segment, Todd opened up about one of the deepest battles he's faced since incarceration, his struggle with faith. And, in a sentence that struck a chord with thousands, he confessed, "I was so angry with God." For a man who built so much of his public image around faith and family, that admission was not made lightly. Todd had long touted his Christian beliefs as a cornerstone of his identity. Episodes of his reality series often featured moments of prayer, references to scripture, and the invocation of divine guidance during hard times. Fans knew him as outspoken, opinionated, and occasionally over the top, but also as a man who made no secret of his relationship with God. So to hear him admit to spiritual fury was both jarring and strangely relatable. Behind the gates of the Pensacola Federal Prison Camp, stripped of his designer lifestyle, daily contact with his children, and sense of public purpose, Todd said he found himself in a spiritual crisis. The man who once appeared so confident in God's plan now found himself questioning everything. His prayers, once flowing freely, were suddenly filled with frustration, confusion, even silence. He said there were nights he sat on his bunk in the quiet darkness, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "Where are you now?" The initial weeks of imprisonment were, according to Todd's words, some of the loneliest of his life. He missed his wife Julie terribly, who herself was incarcerated in a separate facility. The pain of being apart from her and their children, especially their youngest son Grayson and granddaughter Chloe, created an emotional void. Todd had always been a fiercely involved father, and now he was separated from the people who gave his life meaning. The isolation made him question everything, including the faith he once held so dear. He described moments of bargaining, of pleading, of raging against what he saw as the unfairness of it all. He said he felt abandoned by the very God he had spent years praising. He asked over and over again, "Why me? And how could this happen if you love me?" He felt like his faith had been a one-sided relationship, one where he gave and gave, only to be met with silence when he needed God most. This kind of spiritual grief is not uncommon, but coming from a man who had always put faith at the forefront of his identity, it adds layers of complexity. Todd didn't just lose his freedom. He lost his sense of divine purpose. The man who once said he believed everything happened for a reason found himself staring into a void where no reason made sense. For weeks, he said he felt spiritually numb. No desire to read scripture. No strength to pray. No comfort in hymns or old sermons. It was as if the core of who he was had been hollowed out. But then, as Todd shared through his daughter, something began to shift. Not through a miraculous epiphany, but through slow, painful honesty. It started with acknowledging that his anger with God was real. He stopped pretending to be okay, even in his prayers. He told God the truth, that he felt betrayed, that he was furious, that he didn't know if he believed anymore. And somehow, in that honesty, he said he began to feel the faintest flicker of connection again. He likened it to talking to a friend after a long fight. The words didn't come easy, and there was still a lot of pain between them. But saying something, anything, felt better than silence. Slowly, the prayers returned. They weren't polished or poetic. They were rough, tearful, and sometimes bitter. But they were real. And that, Todd believes, is where healing began. One of the most powerful moments Todd described was during a chapel service inside the prison. He said he was sitting in the back, not really wanting to be there, when an older inmate stood up and began to sing an old gospel song. It was off-key and cracked with emotion, but it hit Todd like a wave. The lyrics spoke of brokenness, redemption, and the long road back to grace. Todd said he cried that day, not because the pain was gone, but because he finally felt like he wasn't carrying it alone. Since then, Todd has slowly rebuilt his relationship with faith, not as a public performance, but as a personal lifeline. He's begun reading devotionals again, journaling about his doubts and small victories, and sharing spiritual reflections in letters to his family. He's also been encouraging other inmates who are struggling, sharing his journey with honesty and without judgment. He says he no longer feels the need to present a perfect image of faith. Instead, he's learning that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about holding on, even when everything around you says let go. Savannah has shared how proud she is of her father's willingness to be vulnerable. She says that hearing him admit to his anger and struggle has made him more human, more relatable, and in some ways, stronger than he's ever been. She believes that God is still working in Todd's life, even behind prison walls. And she's determined to keep sharing his story with the world, not as a redemption arc written for TV, but as a real-life testimony of grace in the trenches. Todd's story resonates deeply in a time when so many are quietly wrestling with their own faith. His willingness to voice what many feel but are afraid to say, that sometimes you can be furious with God, is a rare kind of spiritual courage. It shows that faith isn't just built in churches or during mountaintop moments. Sometimes it's built in the valley, in the cell, in the silence. Today, Todd is still navigating the complexities of incarceration. The road ahead is long. There are still days that feel heavy, moments when doubt creeps back in. But there is also hope. And that hope isn't rooted in circumstances, but in the belief that even in his lowest moments, he is seen and heard by a God who can handle his anger, his questions, and his pain. The Todd Chrisley the world once knew, the reality star, the polished patriarch, the image of success, has been replaced by someone quieter, humbler, and more reflective. He's still flawed, still learning, still grappling with what it means to live a life of faith in a place that feels so far from holy. But in that journey, he may have found something more enduring than fame or fortune, a deeper, more honest relationship with God. And as his story continues to unfold, one thing is clear. Todd Chrisley is no longer trying to prove anything to the world. He's just trying to find peace with his Creator, one unfiltered prayer at a time. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, America Trends 24, and stay with us.